No protests, no headlines, no votes in parliament. Just a group of men in suits meeting in a quiet Swiss city called Basel, deciding how much risk the entire world is allowed to take. It sounds absurd, but those closed-door meetings created the most powerful financial laws on earth, rules that dictate how much your bank can lend, how much risk it can carry, and how much money it must keep in reserve. And most people have never heard of them. If you love the hidden machinery behind money and power, hit like and subscribe before we go on. Now, let's dive in. Our story begins in 1974 with a small German bank that nearly crashed the global financial system. Reshaped Bank, a mid-sized institution in Cologne specializing in foreign exchange. One June afternoon, it went bankrupt in the middle of a currency transaction. American counterparties had sent millions of dollars to Germany that morning. But by the time the German side was supposed to send back the equivalent marks, Reshaped was gone. Stuck between time zones, the default froze the entire network of global payments, and banks worldwide realized how fragile the system had become. The panic forced the world's central bankers to do something unprecedented: coordinate. The G10, the richest economies, gathered at the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, a discrete institution that had become a kind of central bank for central banks. There, they formed the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, building the blueprint for how global finance would define safety itself. In 1988, the committee unveiled Basel, the first truly international banking standard. One simple requirement: banks had to hold at least 8% of their risk-weighted assets in capital. Lend out $100, keep $8 of your own money as a cushion. For the first time, risk had a global yardstick, and while it wasn't technically law, it became law in practice. But the simplicity that made Basel I powerful also made it dangerous. Government debt got a 0% risk. Weight banks needed no capital against it, while corporate loans were 100% weighted, requiring the full buffer. The logic was clear. Governments rarely default, companies can fail. But the effect was dramatic. Banks began pouring money into government bonds, not businesses. A rule designed to make banking safer had quietly redirected global credit toward the state. By the late 1990s, markets had exploded in complexity. Banks argued they could measure risk better than regulators, and in 2004, the committee agreed. Basel II handed the keys to the vault back to the bankers. Large institutions could now use their own internal models to decide how much capital they needed. If a model showed an asset was safe, they set aside less and lent more. This was regulation by spreadsheet. The lower your calculated risk, the higher your profits. As one analyst put it, they were letting the fox design its own henhouse. And the foxes got creative. Before 2008, banks assigned extremely low risk weights to AAA-rated mortgage bonds as safe as government debt, according to the models. In practice, they were toxic time bombs, multiplied across balance sheets at breathtaking leverage. Then came the crash. The subprime crisis revealed that the entire system of risk weighting was built on sand. The safest assets turned out to be the most dangerous. Trillions evaporated, and governments had to bail out their banks. In the wreckage, regulators returned to Basel. By 2010, Basel III was born, tightening the definition of capital, adding a leverage ratio against excessive borrowing and a liquidity ratio requiring banks to survive a 30-day market freeze. In theory, Basel III made the system tougher. In practice, it relied on the same fragile core: confidence in models, ratings, and political will. Even now, many major banks hold less than $5 in true capital for every $100 of assets. What began as a simple 8% rule became a labyrinth only insiders could follow. Risk didn't disappear. It just changed shape, becoming the invisible architecture of global finance. And the world outside barely noticed. But what happens to countries that don't follow Basel's rules? The committee has no police, no court, no legal power, yet every major economy treats its standards as gospel. The reason is reputation. A bank that doesn't meet Basel standards is treated like a driver without insurance. When a country lags behind, its credit ratings fall, and borrowing gets more expensive. That's why Though Basel is officially voluntary, almost everyone adopts it. It's not law, it's leverage. Fall behind, and your banks risk isolation from the global network that moves capital across borders. The result is silent exclusion, and the world divided into tiers. Wealthy economies first, emerging markets left to catch up. So what is Basel for? It's the final stage of Basel III, closing the loopholes that nearly brought the system down. The committee knew banks manipulated their models, so it introduced the output floor. No bank can cut its capital requirement by more than roughly 27% below the standard method. A hard limit on creativity or on deception. The rollout began in 2023. On the surface, the Basel Accords look like technical reforms. Beneath that, they are mechanisms of power, deciding who gets credit and whose economies grow faster. When Basel declared government bonds risk-free, it wasn't just an assumption, it was an incentive. Banks shifted huge portions of their portfolios into state debt, which needed no capital buffer, creating a built-in buyer for governments. By 2020, global banks held over $13 trillion in government bonds. For smaller banks, the consequences are sharper. Compliance requires modeling teams, legal departments, and constant audits. Easy for JP Morgan, ruinous for a regional lender. Many merged or exited. Basel, meant to prevent systemic risk, quietly concentrated power in the hands of the few, the banks too big to fail. But the deeper danger is uniformity. Every major bank now measures risk the same way. When everyone holds the same assets and reacts to the same triggers, safety becomes correlation. One domino falls, and the rest follow. Basel made finance look safer, but more synchronized, and therefore more brittle. There's an irony here. Basel was created to make banking more resilient, yet it did so by standardizing fragility, replacing judgment with models and discretion with formulas. It made regulation feel objective, like physics, but these rules are written by people, negotiated by committees, and shaped by lobbyists who understand every decimal better than the public ever will. So what do we learn from Basel? That regulation can never fully control risk, it can only redirect it. Each attempt to make banking safer pushes danger somewhere else. A new product, a new loophole, a new part of the world. Basel didn't eliminate the boom-bust cycle, it just changed its geography. It made finance legible, turning a messy world into a grid of ratios that look scientific but rest on trust. And trust, as history shows, is the most volatile asset of all. The next crisis may not come from where Basel expects it never does. But when it arrives, the same committees will meet again in Switzerland, and the same quiet process will begin. Basel was meant to make banking safer. Instead, it made it invisible. And whoever writes the rules for invisible risk rules the world. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this gave you a new perspective on how money and power really work, hit like and subscribe, because history always has the answers. You just have to know where to look.